Chapter 17, Real Crime, Real Time. In December, I violated my probation from the Marchman Act, which I was still on, even though I got out of Coastal Compass, by not fulfilling the outpatient obligation. So yeah, this whole time I'm still having to go to probation officers and shit. Like, I never escaped that. And I would just use fake piss. As a result, I was sent to Operation PAR, it was supposed to be 6 months, but I finessed. A brief third-party addiction treatment center in Clearwater that I had a small going-away celebration with Capone and Shepard, and we all took a lot of acid and smoked numerous blunts, like back-to-back backwoods all night. Once I was out of Operation PAR, I hit the races and started hustling again, popping pills and selling drugs. Unlike the meek and mild Chipotle era, this time I was being fronted pounds of drugs and making thousands and thousands of dollars. I was also selling unwholesome drugs like loads of Xanax and fake oxys. My living situation during this time was unstable. I was too ashamed of how deep into my pipeline of addictions and criminal lifestyle to stay with my parents, so I drifted around from house to house, staying with whatever friends I could. My primary place of residence was Booth's house, and then also in South St. Pete off 18th South with Daryl and them. I met Booth through Capone. He was a real doped out kid, and I hope he's alive. I wouldn't be surprised if he's not. Constantly on heroin and Xanax. Because of his drug usage, there was very little he cared about, including his house, which was open practically to anyone who wished to come, if they had drugs. While living with Booth, I messed up a front I was giving. My cravings had hit at an all-time high, and I did all the drugs I was expected to sell. Oopsies. In an attempt to pay my debts, I went on a wild robbing spree, once again breaking into all the cars in my area. My addictions had seized me to the point where I was also in danger due to my debts. The level of desperation I felt made me sink to any depths to settle my scores and to get high. Knowing that my dad kept a couple $100 in cash sitting in his rental house that he would rent and live at, I broke in one night while blacked out and I stole it all. My mind was too fixated on satiating my addictions and deluded by fear to consider the consequence of what I was doing. I couldn't even think another way of being in the world. Fortunately, God has a way of using consequences of actions to rip off our blinders. One day while making my usual rounds of car burglaries, I burst into a work truck, thinking it would have something of value in it. To my surprise, the 3 workers it belonged to were not far away. They ran up and began to beat me, and of course I fought back. Considering the job a lost cause, I ran back because I couldn't win, there was too many of them, to Booth's house, leaving a trail of blood from my broken nose. Soon after, the sheriff's office car pulled right behind it where the police department. Yeah, this was such a crazy story. And I'm 18 at this point. The sheriff's office had come to pick me up on a Marchman Act petition my parents had filed again, and the police had come following reports of a string of car burglaries. At the time, I found it quite humorous. Who would take me in? Would they play rock, paper, scissors for custody? In the game of bureaucratic tug-of-war, the local police won and took me in on the felony charges. I was taken to Hillsborough County Jail on Orient Road, where my legs and hands were bound by shackles connected together with a vertical chain. During the whole booking process, I was barred out and belligerent. I spat on the faces of the ops, not literally in their face, but I spat like on the ground and shit, barking insults. Fuck you fucking pigs, I yelled. When I get out of here, I'm gonna fucking kill you. In the booking area, a crowd of inmates began shouting at me. Some yelled in disgust at my vengeful attitude and yelling, "Shut your jit ass up, you ain't gonna do shit." Others cheered in support, screaming, "Yeah man, fuck the police, tell them crackers what time it is." Soon the whole room was arguing and cheering and on the verge of total chaos. And there's like 100 people in this room, in the booking room of Orient. Annoyed by my big ruckus, the cops picked me up by my hands and feet, carried me through the jail before throwing me into an isolated cell. Once they were alone with me in that cell, they beat the fuck out of me with their elbows and knees. They wrapped me up in chains and put me in a red jumpsuit and brought me into solitary confinement. For 4 weeks, I sat alone in that cell. There were no bars to see through, only a small silver-like hole for the guard to pass food through. A mean, bald guard came by a few times a day. If I wanted the basic necessities of life, I had to be awake when he came, as he would never knock to alert me when it was time for a meal, a shower, or a phone call. Because I was battling intense withdrawals from the drugs, and they didn't fucking put me in the ICU, I missed out on most opportunities in those 4 weeks. I ate only a few meals, showered twice, and used the phone a few times. The 2 times I showered, the guard stood in front of me, eyeing me up and down. He would say things like, kid, I'ma see you in here. You're the type that keeps coming in and going out again and coming in. I can't wait to see you get bitched up in prison. He was the only human interaction I received, and when I made it to the phone, nobody answered my calls. I had pushed the limits of all of my closest relationships, my mother and father and friends, and I knew to face this lesson. I knew I needed to face this lesson. Resigned and saddened by my loneliness, I lost fighting spirit and I melted onto the cold floor. Just when I had given up, a voice steeped with devotion and madness whirled into my cell. Hey man, do you love Jesus? I looked around for the source of the voice. High on the cell wall was an air vent connected to the neighboring cell. Yeah, I mumbled, Jesus is cool, I guess. Cool, the man chuckled. Christ is king, man. He paused for a moment and then spoke again. Hey man, check it. I don't need to eat. I don't need to shower. I lay in the filth on the cell all day and it don't matter. Ask me why. Why? Because I am not this body of flesh and blood. I am the soul within, and God feeds me in my heart. I paused and thought about what he was saying. I had experienced psychedelics like the DMT trip with Alex, where my consciousness existed independently of my body. In a way, I understood what he was talking about. You're right, I said. The man grumbled and made unintelligible sounds with his mouth. He did this for a few minutes and then spoke again. When you bathe in the spirit long enough, God gives you the power to speak in tongues. That's cool, man, I said. While his words sounded great and his tongue speaking was a bit funny, I was in despair. I felt like I had nobody. Sensing my sadness, the man questioned me. What's wrong? I'm rotting here alone. I have nobody. If the way I have lived has led me here, it will lead me to death. A tear welled up in my eye and I put my face down to the cold hard floor. Man, shut up, my neighbor said. You don't know anything. What? I said, surprised by his response. For a religious man, he sure seemed to lack compassion in the presence of suffering. The man laughed hysterically and said, Ephesians 4:22-24, to put off your old self, which belongs to your former manner of life and is corrupt through deceitful desires, and to be renewed in the spirit of your minds, and to put the new self, created after the likeness of God, is in true righteousness and holiness. After he said those words, intense pain struck my heart. What had I been doing? Had I lost all sensibility? Had my addictions and bad habits turned me into a demon? I'm a monster, I thought. I robbed my own dad. At that moment, I got on my hands and my knees and I prayed to God to show me a new way of life and thanked the man for his words. The two of us chanted for the rest of the time in solitary, often against the orders of the guards. I didn't care about the orders. Like, that man was my only source of hope. I will be forever grateful to that angelic madman. After my time in solitary, I spent about another 2 months in jail. The main thing that occupied my mind was many court dates. It was a bit like going on a field trip, but with chains. The guards would come by, collect everyone who had court that day, file us into a big line, and shackle us together. We would walk about half a mile on our long metal thread, all connected by shackles of feet and hands, all stumbling along until we were loaded on a bus. Once again, I sat in front of Judge Espinoza, and when I walked into the courtroom the first day, he sighed. He says, Connor, you're back. My parents attended the court dates and vouched for me. They said that they wanted me to get well and that they didn't want their baby to go to prison. That's why they had filed the Marchman Act petition in the first place. Sympathizing with my parents' pain, Espinoza decided to give me one last chance. He said that if I would not go to prison and that my felony charges would be dropped if I completed a drug pretrial intervention program, I agreed to the conditions and I was sent to DACO. DACO, or the Drug Abuse Comprehensive Coordination Office, was very similar to other rehab and behavioral health facilities. I'll save most of the details to avoid being too repetitive. The main difference was this program, however, was that where the big dogs went. Because I was 18 now, I was in a facility with adults. Many of them had been to prison and gotten out early to attend DACO. While I was there, I lived amongst gangsters, bangers, and met people from gangs like GD, Latin Kings, Crips, Almighty Vice Lord Nation, and Folks Front. For the sake of avoiding too much repetition, I will spare this book from most of the details of my time in DACO. What I will cover is how careless I was in there. In order to make money to pay for things like cigarettes and spice in DACO, I was in communication with friends on the outside who were executing drug deals for me. It's so savage. Yeah, dude, I was having people people trapping off my Snapchat while I was locked up. One day, about halfway through the 1-year program, I was caught smoking spice by the staff members. Somehow, in my intoxicated days, I left the remnants of the joint in the bathroom, and the next day I was kicked out. I was taken back to Orient Road Jail for 2 months and sat in front of Judge Espinoza again. Somehow, he was still merciful to me. I was not going to prison, but there was talk of sending me back to DACO for a full year this time. Now, by this time, I was well aware of how much of a cash cow the prison system was, and all of its connections like DACO were. I will briefly introduce some of the numbers to provide a notion of how much money is involved in this industry. According to the Prison Policy Initiative, the U.S. government spends around $80.7 billion a year on public prisons and $3.9 billion on private prisons. Many of these public prisons contact private companies for a great deal of their needs, such as commissary, phone, and medical services. There are over 4,000 companies that profit from mass incarceration. The Florida Department of Corrections vendor for phone services via Path Technologies charges 13.5 cents a minute. These collect calls are the only options for incarcerated people other than one free 15-minute phone call per month, which is only granted as a reward for good behavior. The annual cost to families for prison phone calls and commissary purchases is $2.9 billion in the United States. The average daily wage for the incarcerated workers is only 86 cents. What? It's like for the people in jail doing work camp. In the state of Florida, incarcerated workers are not paid at all. According to the American Civil Liberties Union, prison laborers produce $2 billion a year in goods and more than $9 billion per year in services for the maintenance of prisons. Now, I am by no means a political intellectual, but something ain't right. While DACO is a non-profit organization that at least demonstrates that we have made some progress towards judicial systems driving by rehabilitation instead of punishment, they are two contract private companies with particular functions. Much like prisons and jails, in order to receive state funding, DACO had to have a particular quota of its residents. The effect of this requirement is the marginalization of the individual. Instead of being perceived as a human, you're being perceived as being who has lived a unique life experience, unique sufferings. Residents, in a subtle way, become a means to keep the whole ship afloat. Feeling all of this within myself and having experienced it so many times in various places, when I heard I might go back to DACO, I was determined to find a way out. I suspected that my best bet would be to transfer my residency to Pinellas County in hopes of being able to attend Operation PAR, which was... that's wrong. It says it's only 1 month. It's technically longer, but the insurance companies have to pay, and I know how to finesse the insurance companies. So after explaining that my dad lived in Pinellas County and that having to drive back and forth between Hillsborough and Pinellas is what made me fail my previous probation, I was approved to go to Operation PAR. After my release in 2018, I passed all of the outpatient drug tests with fake pee from a smoke shop. Finally, I finished paperwork at the Pinellas County Sheriff's Office and complete my parole, wiping the felony charges off my record permanently. After 8 months of being thrown around in chains and jumpsuits, I was free. Chapter 18. Back on the streets.